There are many great NHL veteran players who have yet to have the opportunity to get their name on the Stanley Cup. In today's video, I've invited a bunch of other great hockey YouTubers to give their opinions on who's that one NHL veteran you're really rooting for to get his name on the Stanley Cup before he retires. We'll get into all that coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome to Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So who is that one veteran NHL player you're really rooting for to get his name on the Stanley Cup before he retires? There's certainly a lot of great choices out there, and as I mentioned, I've invited many other great hockey YouTubers to submit their clips and give me their thoughts and opinions on who they'd like to see accomplish that before they retire. Personally, my pick would be Jumbo Joe Thornton of the San Jose Sharks. He's had a terrific career. He's played a very long time, worked his way up near the top of the list now with some of the great stats in the NHL, all-time assist leaders and points leaders. He's really up there a long ways, so he certainly is, a good example of longevity and a player who's had to adapt his game here over the years. He's been a great leader for the Sharks, before that with the Bruins as well, and I just really think he deserves to have that opportunity to get his name on the Stanley Cup. And now I'm going to throw it over to some of these other great hockey YouTubers to give their opinions on who they'd like to see accomplish this. All of these great hockey YouTubers will have their information on the screen as they talk, and all of their links to their channels will be down below in the description. I highly recommend you check them out and subscribe if you haven't already.
Thanks so much, Mike, for having me on. Now, if I had to pick one person, I'm not going to be biased. I'm not going to pick a Golden Knight. If I had to, probably Derek England. But to not pick a Golden Knight, one person that I would like to see win a Stanley Cup at a kind of an older age, I'm going to go with Rinne, right? Rinne, 36 years old, won his Vezina last year, which was good for him. Made it to the Stanley Cup final, didn't win it, right? Lost against the Penguins. It'd be nice to see him get one. Golden Knights can't make it. I'll probably be cheering for him to get one. I'm not saying I like everyone on that team, but definitely Rinne is one of those guys that I would like to see win a Stanley Cup.
I would love to see this guy, Roberto Luongo, win a Stanley Cup. As a lifelong Canucks fan, all 44 years of my life, he's one of my favorite all-time Canucks players. He had a great 7.5 seasons here, became an elite goaltender while he was here, gave his heart and his soul to the club and to the city, became the face of the franchise along with the Sedins, and led our team to one win away from the Stanley Cup back in 2011. He signed a massive contract in September 2009, 12 years, $64 million, and then the Canucks traded Luongo and that contract back to Florida in March of 2014. Thanks a lot, John Tortorella. Now he's 40 years old. He's got 3 years left on that contract, but his body's starting to break down. He's not playing as much. It's taking him a longer time to recover from injuries, and he's got a brand new coach announced today in Joel Quenneville. Ironically, the same Joel Quenneville that was leading the Chicago Blackhawks in battle against the Vancouver Canucks back in the rivalry heyday about a decade ago. So yes, he's getting old. He's probably not going to get a chance to win a cup while he's in Florida. But of all active players, he's the one player that I would still love to see hoist the Stanley Cup. God bless, and go Canucks go.
Current player in the NHL that I would want to see win a Stanley Cup before they retire is without a doubt Henrik Lundqvist of the New York Rangers. He's arguably the guy that will go down in history as the greatest goaltender of all time to never win a Stanley Cup, if he doesn't win one, and also if he surpasses Roberto Luongo in all-time wins. Henrik Lundqvist is currently 6th in all-time wins with 449. Roberto Luongo is 3rd with 489. Both guys don't have Stanley Cups. I've always been a big fan of Lundqvist. I love his persona, and he just seems like a real down-to-earth, genuine guy. And right now, with the Rangers going through their full-on committed rebuild, it's just not going to happen for Henrik Lundqvist in his career span. It's very unfortunate, but he's a very team-oriented guy. He loves the Rangers, loves that atmosphere. I don't see him going anywhere. I see him staying committed with the organization until he eventually retires. So it might not ever happen for him unless he leaves and goes elsewhere and secures the Stanley Cup. But I've always been a big supporter of his, a big fan, and I just really hope it happens in his career.
Vets that I want to see win the Stanley Cup before they retire. Now, obviously, it's easy for me to say this sitting here in this room, but it's gotta be, for me, Carey Price and Shea Weber. Both of these guys are likely Hall of Fame hockey players in the future. Carey Price, I'd say at this point, has a spot locked up, and Shea Weber certainly is very close. Definitely want to see these two win a Stanley Cup before they retire, and I think it's quite possible with the way that the Habs are trending. Now, outside of Montreal, for me, Joe Thornton, one of the best playmakers of this decade, managed to keep his quality of play late into his 30s and early 40s. Guy's a stud, love the beard, and it would be great to see him win a Stanley Cup, so hopefully he can do that this year.
Well, as a San Jose Sharks fan, how could I not pick number 19, Jumbo Joe Thornton? Thornton was not named to the NHL's top 100 players of all time, and I think that's just because he does not have a Stanley Cup and because he plays on the West Coast. But now he's in the top 10 all-time in assists. He's in the top 15 all-time in scoring. He's been through a lot in the last few years. He was the captain for the Sharks. That was stripped, and then later on he had these terrible knee injuries. He wasn't even supposed to really come back and play to the level that he has this season, but he's had a great year. He's done a terrific job mentoring Kevin LeBanc and getting Marcus Sorensen to amplify his game at times. So really, Jumbo Joe, the perfect way to end your career would be to hoist Lord Stanley's Cup, and there is nothing that Sharks fans want to see more than that. I could also have picked Jason Spezza of the Dallas Stars. I think he's a little under the radar. Marc Giordano, and even for the Sharks, Brent Burns. So lots of grizzled veterans out there who I hope can get a shot at Lord Stanley's Cup this year.
I'm a Canucks fan, and I know that. But Audie's probably going to love me for this. If it were up to me, I'd choose Marc Giordano. The guy's 35 years of age, he's at 70 points, and he's having such a fantastic rejuvenation of a career year here for a defenseman, especially at his age. The guy works so hard, and if it were up to me, I'd say he wins the Norris as well. I know I'm a Canucks fan, but to me, if the Calgary Flames win the Stanley Cup, that's fine. Marc Giordano is a guy, in my opinion, who absolutely deserves it at this point. Look at what he's been able to do captaining that fantastic Calgary team that has now clinched a spot in the playoffs, that has, what, like 5 guys at 70 points or something? That's absolutely nuts. And Marc Giordano is the guy who is driving that force. So if it were up to me, I'd choose him for sure.
So one player that's getting up there in age that I would really like to see win a Stanley Cup is Bobby Ryan. I understand he's only 32, but, you know, he's definitely at the very, very end of his prime. Obviously, when you look at his stats and how he's been playing, you know, he's definitely exited that prime, and obviously ever since signing that big contract with Ottawa has been very disappointing. However, I still see a lot of skill in his game. I very heavily respect him as a player, and I would really just love to see him win a Stanley Cup, especially with the right team. I'd like to see it happen in Ottawa, mainly because that'd be a really good story and whatnot, but just I think his mix of talent and just raw playing ability, his stick handling skills, and just he is such a good player, and in my opinion, incredibly underrated for what it's worth. Yes, obviously you have to factor in how much he makes, but I still think for what it's worth, him as a hockey player, he still has skill, and I would love to see him win a Stanley Cup.
Hello guys, my name is Grav, and I've been asked by Top Shelf Hockey to give my opinions on one player who I would really want to see win a cup before he retires. And there is some pretty obvious picks out there. Guys like Joe Thornton, I would love to see him win a Stanley Cup before he retires, but I went with a little bit of a less obvious pick, and I went with Roberto Luongo. Of course, the goaltender right now for the Florida Panthers. I would love to see this guy win the Stanley Cup. His Twitter account is freaking amazing. The guy has such a great personality, and he's been on some bad teams in the past. The 2000s Islanders, the early 2000s Florida Panthers. He's been on some pretty bad teams and has carried, of course, the Vancouver Canucks to the final a couple of times, or the final at one time in 2011. He's on the Florida Panthers right now. It is looking like he might retire after this offseason, which is pretty unfortunate. And if there is another chance that he does go for it, I wish that he does go on a Stanley Cup contending team, so he does get that chance to hoist the Stanley Cup, because I think he definitely does deserve it for how long he's played in the NHL and for how great he's been in the history of the NHL as well.
So as always, leave your thoughts and opinions down below in the comment section. Which NHL veteran player are you really rooting for to finally get his name on the Stanley Cup and have that opportunity to hoist that trophy up over his head and celebrate like he's so long deserved here after having a great NHL career? If you're new to the channel, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up before you go. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching. We will catch you next time.